You're all very welcome, first and foremost, I suppose, and thanks very much for joining us for the artist talk with Éiméar and Kat. If I could just ask everybody, just other than myself and Éiméar and Kat, just to mute your chat for a sec, just to mute your chat for, I suppose, the duration of the talk. So this is now regurgitating what I've said already, but I've been working with Éiméar and Kat over the kind of full duration of this residency, first and foremost, as part of the Glebe House intervention, where they showed their body as a body work, kind of in a fractured way throughout the house. And then most recently in the commission of new work as part of the Other Worlds exhibition, and we'll be getting to both of those before the end of the talk. My first encounter with Éiméar and Kat's work actually would have been as part of the Royal Scottish Academy a few years ago, where I actually got to see some of their wonderful 3D printed crucifix forms. Although at that stage I didn't put two and two together, didn't realize that they hailed from Donegal as well. But anyway, just to say, it's been the most amazing experience working with Éiméar and Kat across this residency. That made my life very easy. And so just to say a massive thanks to Éiméar and Kat. And so just to give a wee bit of context about Éiméar and Kat as well, they're originally from Milford, and they have a collaborative practice, and are currently based in Glasgow. And so in 2020, they each graduated from Edinburgh College of Art with a first class honours BA in Intermediate Art. In recent years, the works have been selected for a range of esteemed exhibitions, screenings, and residencies. And I suppose just to say, Éiméar and Kat, you're very welcome, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this talk today. Just to start off with, just maybe to take us back in time a bit, just want to discuss when your interest in visual practice kind of first began, and did you always have a sense that a career in artistic practice is what you would want to do?
I feel like I started being interested in art in high school through doing it for leaving certain stuff, but I mostly wanted to do film directing or something through doing a fine art degree. But whenever I was on degree, I mostly made short films. I kind of like how through fine art you can do things a bit more experimentally and with a lower budget. I feel like if you work in more commercial film, it's a bigger team and there's more, you have less control over the overall outcome. Yeah, I feel like we both kind of our original interest was rooted more in kind of traditional or feature, not commercial, but kind of art house sort of film. But when we started degree, we realized more the way we wanted to work was more compatible with a kind of fine art pathway, or yeah.
Sure. And just on that then, were there any key figures that served as inspiration for you guys?
Do you mean when we were younger? I feel when I was in high school and stuff, I really liked people like Steve McQueen, the film director. But I feel he did an undergrad in Chelsea. I think he did a fine art degree, but he kind of went into feature film from a fine art background. But I kind of always that mixture, traversing those two worlds a little bit. Yeah, I feel that stuff was just a bit more accessible to me back then too, because there are some galleries in Donegal and Ireland and stuff, but I feel I didn't really look at stuff like that all that much when I was in high school. They had the Turner Prize in Derry whenever I was in leaving cert, and I really liked Laura Prevost did an installation that was video with pottery and stuff like that. I feel that was the first time I saw a more expanded interdisciplinary video installation in real life. I really like that.
And so then moving beyond, I suppose, the secondary school context, how did your experience in Edinburgh shift and inform your practice?
We actually started working together on degree when we were in Edinburgh, but it was partially because we both made work like individually, but our work was sort of like too similar because we had like a lot of like similar like influences and stuff. We spoke like a lot about our work with each other, and it kind of just like made sense to like start trying to work like together a little bit. Like instead, we
Mhm.
kind of like developed like a collaborative way of like working and developed like our video practice like together when we were there. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like before that we both did like a foundation degree or a foundation diploma in like Leeds, but at the beginning that was kind of like loads of different pathways, like design and fashion and stuff like that. But we both like finished that doing like fine art, and I like developed my fine art practice like mostly when I was in Edinburgh. But yeah.
So a question actually that I had later, but it makes sense to ask it now, is so you mentioned there about working as a collaborative practice,
Yeah.
and would you be able to give some insight, I suppose, into how you navigate the creation of work as a collaborative practice?
I feel like initially we were like shooting video and stuff together, but then we kind of like started making like animations with like photographs and stuff, but we were like kind of making collage type things where we would like borrow parts of like things each other were doing and kind of like mix them together and like animate them. But I feel like we kind of like carried that process over to like 3D animation. Like I feel like we'll both make like different like 3D models but put them together in like kind of like collaborative scenes, and we'll both like animate like each other's scenes and stuff. Like I feel like it's quite easy to like do it collaboratively because it's so much like labor to do it on your own. I feel like Yeah,
it's
but
just
like,
easier to have more people doing it.
like, cause it's all like digital anyway. It's like really easy to like transfer stuff to like each other and like combine like the work that we're doing like individually and like edit like each other's stuff. Yeah.
Sure. And so just basically, like you've mentioned, obviously this pivot towards uh, animation. Where did that interest in animation come from?
I feel like it was like partially at first like because like we were shooting stuff in camera with like DSLRs and stuff, but I don't know, like I just never really like figured out like a way of doing that where I really liked the way it looked, and it's kind of hard and like expensive to like try and make sets for stuff like that. I feel like I kind of like didn't really like anything that I made like that, so I feel like we started doing that collage type stuff was more like 2D animation, but that's quite limited, so we like started doing 3D just as like a more versatile form of animation. I feel like I just like 3D because you can like design stuff that doesn't exist. It's like you don't need to like construct everything physically because that's like time consuming and like expensive. And I feel like 3D has like its own limitations because it's like hard to do like certain things with it. But I feel like it's quite easy to like make worlds and stuff, and it's easy to like manifest ideas in it like quite quickly.
So it started perhaps as a practical concern then.
Yeah, kind of. I feel like we like used to like when we did like in-camera stuff, we played a lot with doing like kind of like analog special effects and things, but like when we were making things that like look slightly surreal or where we wanted to use like effects, it's like kind of difficult to do that in a way that like doesn't look kind of cheap or like low production in a way that we didn't really want. That's like always like a bad thing, but like I feel like to achieve the kind of thing that we were trying to do, it's just like easier to do it with like 3D modeling because you have like quite a lot of control over like every aspect of it, like visually.
Sure. Could I just ask a bit more then about your actual creation of objects in Blender? Um, so, I mean, I know you have said previously that just meticulously craft every object of your work, that nothing is stock. And so, why would you say that is significant?
Um, I don't know. I feel like I like designing the scenes. Like I feel like they have a certain kind of affect. Like I don't really always like I feel like if you download models or something, they can look quite generic. So I feel like to look at like stock images or something, I don't really know. I feel like also like making like 3D models in the video is a way of like making objects that we like that we would like make. Otherwise, it's just like easier to make them on blender, and like ideally I probably would like make more of this stuff like as like a sculpture, but it would like require so many different like technical skills I don't have, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
But like also like with like designing the objects, like I don't know, like I just like doing it as well. So that's partially why we do it.
In terms of the division of labor, then between, because I know you guys had just said that it's useful that with the amount of work that needs to be made, that you have having more of you to make that work. So just in terms of the division of labor, how do you decide who would be responsible for what?
Well, it's not very organized. I feel like we'll just like decide like what kind of thing like we want to like make a video about, and then we'll do like research and stuff around it, and like we'll kind of just both do like what we feel like doing, and then we'll like combine it. We'll like discuss what things we need to make, and then we'll both just like decide to do different things because we have like our own ideas and stuff, and we'll like pass them by each other. But I feel like we're not very good at planning videos. So we'll just kind of make stuff and then like decide what to do with it.
Sure. So I mean, one of the significant aspects of your work is obviously the relationship between the visual and the text. And you've previously mentioned that Hartman's critical fabulation is a particularly important reference point. I suppose my experience going through art college as a painter saw narrative in some ways as a negatively loaded term, and we discussed this previously. But in your work, narrative is a key concern. So just wonder if you might speak a little bit about that.
I feel like I like am personally like just more interested in stuff that has like a narrative. I feel like my interest in like video came more from like being interested in like narrative films. I feel like I just feel more engaged by like that kind of format. Like I feel like it's partially just like a personal preference for me. Like I don't I think also like in a way like working with historical information and stuff, like it's a way of like communicating information that like kind of helps to convey some kind of like affect like attached to like a kind of like condition or like a kind of like historical like event. It's kind of like a way of making it into a story that engages people more and kind of like helps people to understand more viscerally maybe something like conceptually that we're trying to like convey, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So like maybe like the narrative is also like a way of trying to understand information, because I feel like I don't know, with like doing research and stuff, you can just end up with like loads and loads of information that can feel like it doesn't mean anything. Like it's like easier to digest it if you can like draw some kind of line through it or something. But I feel like I like personally find stuff like that like more effective when I watch like other people's works. I feel like I'll just like try and make the kind of thing that I would want to watch.
Sure. I might just ask as well, because I mean, obviously, in a bunch of your works that you have made recently, the Irish context is a significant part of the work. And I just wondered if you might be able to speak a little bit about that, and also how has working in Glasgow impacted that relationship with the Irish context?
Like almost like whenever we like moved to the UK when we went to uni and stuff, it made me realize a bit more about like things that like I took for granted, like in Irish society or like in Ireland, like politically, that I didn't even really notice like different ways in which like the church is really imbricated in the state and things. Like it's more kind of um like normalized, or people like I didn't even really realize just like how things were when I had like more distance, when I lived
Sure.
more, like slightly more secular. Like it kind of like made me think more about like why things are how they are. Like I questioned more like why it was different, and like I don't know, like it gave me like enough distance to kind of like reflect. I feel like almost like looking into like the historical like conditions that like led up to like the sort of like whole like political environment like in Ireland like now, I find kind of useful as a way of like contextualizing or like understanding like my own life, like if it's slightly like cathartic about it. Like even though I live like in the UK, like I still feel much more rooted like in Ireland, like in terms of like my identity and things. Like I think it's I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we were both making kind of like auto-theoretical work for a while, but I feel like I've kind of like lost interest in that. Like I feel like we were both kind of like thinking about like experiences that we'd had like ourselves. So I feel like I'm more so interested in like the context and like kind of like figuring out like why things are how they are societally in Ireland and stuff. Like I feel like that kind of like resolves something for me a bit.
Sure. So just on that, then, um, I mean, if I think, even if I think about the two works that you guys have shown as part of the two exhibitions from this residency, so a body is a body is a body that was shown in the Glebe House, and then a border of flat stones that's been shown as part of the Other Worlds exhibition. Both of those works take on, in some ways, different lenses, in that a body is a body is a body seems to be more from like an intimate or personal perspective, um, whereas obviously there's the more historical aspect to a border of flat stones. And I just wondered how you navigate both of those really.
Like the first one, like the body is a body one is like more kind of like engaging with politics or like the societal condition through like speaking through a narrative from like our personal like lives. Like it was based on like a text from like my like undergrad dissertation, but I feel like we like initially kind of like explored those kind of ideas about like sort of like the whole like kind of political or like social structure of like the society, but kind of like engaging with it really like empirically, if you know what I mean, and kind of thinking about like how I like personally experience and realize like an embodied way without like having to like learn something through some kind of like academic research or like it's like something I realized like almost like more like just like empirically through being like subjected to certain conditions, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
But like at that time we were both like really into loads of like kind of like new narrative writing and stuff, like people writing like autobiographical kind of things. But I feel like I just read so much stuff like that. I just got kind of tired of it. But yeah, I feel like the like thing about like the famine is more kind of like historical research. I feel like we were trying to create like narratives in it that had like some kind of affect. Like they're not like there's some parts in it that are kind of like fictional, but they're like based on stuff that we read. So like yeah, it's kind of like fictional stuff that's like based on actual facts, and then it's like interwoven with kind of like historical information and stuff.
So just on that, so I know you have mentioned that your work attempts to fill in gaps in the historical record. What were the gaps that, or were there gaps in the record when it came to the famine and the history of the potato crop in Ireland, that drew you towards that topic? Essentially, what I'm asking, I suppose, is what fueled that initial interest in that period.
I feel like with like the famine, I feel like a lot of people kind of like contest like different like narratives around it. Because I feel like even like the fact that it's like described as like a natural disaster sometimes and stuff, whenever I feel like a lot of like the like starvation and stuff that happened was actually like completely avoidable. Like I feel like the British like administration in Ireland like didn't really manage it like well at all, and like when the potato failed it was like a big disaster because of like how the land was so thoroughly subdivided, and like people like the country was just not very industrialized and stuff. Like I feel like it's like kind of like a symptom of like the fact that it was like colonized. But I feel like there have been like not like as much like acknowledgement of that like in the past. I feel like people talk about that quite a lot like now, but I feel like the video was kind of about that, like how like the kind of like economic policies and stuff that the government implemented like really exacerbated like the suffering and stuff like that.
I know it's one of the things we talked about as well was that broaching the subject of the famine, I think, was a historical source of trauma, kind of in the Irish story. I wonder what shifts you think there's been, because I know this has been written about, obviously, with the 90s being a key turning point. But what shifts do you think there's been that have kind of permitted this new conversation around the famine?
I don't know. I feel like over like the past few years, even like I feel like we did like a project like before that was about like the Magdalene laundries and the mother and baby homes and stuff. But I feel like there's been like more discussion around those things like in the past few years too, and they've been more acknowledged and there's been like more investigations into. I feel like I think recently there's been way more kind of like almost even like historical research and like mapping of kind of like modern or like more contemporary like Irish history, like kind of like 19th to like 21st century history. Like there's just been way more kind of like research and like kind of like writing done around that where like a narrative starts to like develop around it that's like slightly more, I don't know, like active or like there's more like there's also like more like discourse around like kind of like post-colonial kind of stuff like in Ireland is like just an example. It's like looking like into like Britain's like colonial history and the sort of like violences and like traumas that like have like arisen and still continue to like permeate like those different like places that like were colonized, because I feel like the presence of like that, even though it's like something, well, like Northern Ireland is still part of like the UK, like still like partially like not all of the land has been like repatriated, but like even in the Republic, like I feel like there are certain kind of conditions there that are like directly kind of a result of like the fact that it has been colonized. Yeah.
You mentioned that one of the interesting perspectives of the famine is that it's been put forward as a natural disaster. How do you think collections impact or visual collections impact our relationship with both with history and perhaps specifically within the lens of this exhibition and what's perceived as natural?
Like I don't know, like in culture and stuff in general, I feel like representation kind of like it creates like a visibility for like certain kinds of like narratives. But yeah, I feel like historically with like art and stuff, like a lot of like collections are like predominantly like white and like male, and that just kind of like erases like other like cultural histories and like the dominant narrative. But because I feel like with the history thing, it's kind of just like a story or like what is chosen, the kind of politics around kind of like remembering. It's like things like aren't just like forgotten. It's like how things are curated and like enshrined in a way where they're chosen like to be remembered. But I feel like it's why like kind of the politics around the contents of like archives or collections or like what is kind of platformed or like brought to public attention is so important. Like with like art and stuff too, like it kind of canon becomes quite like naturalized. Like there's like a kind of list of things you're like supposed to look at, but like I feel like into the past, like the kind of people who were like producing that stuff are all quite similar to each other. Like I don't know.
It's definitely been one of the most interesting parts in the research of this exhibition is that there's been gaps in the historical record that have kind of presented themselves. So, for example, with the Louis Le Brocq tapestry, which is an incredible piece, we know the house in which it was woven, but we do not know the name of the actual person that wove the tapestry. And similarly with Eileen McKeough and Teresa McKenna, two, with the significant works from female artists that are in the exhibition. accessing information on those works was very, very difficult, even through the conversation with the Arts Council. So it definitely does reveal those kind of historical feelings, if you like, that just I might just ask, because that's a really wonderful insight that just have given us into a border of flat stones. In terms of how you progress from here, do you have any sense where you would like any sense of where you would like the practice to go going forward? And is there any particular part of history now that seems of interest to you guys as a potential source of inspiration?
I think we were like working like on a project like before we started this commission where we like went to like an archive in Donegal to look at documents from like St. Connell's, like the psychiatric hospital in Letterkenny. And I feel like we had done like a project before about like sort of like social historical like social institutions in Ireland, like Magdalen laundries and mother and baby homes and things like that. But we've been looking kind of at the history of like Irish psychiatric care, and we like still are kind of like developing that work because we like left it for a while to do like the video like about the famine. But I think we are probably going to go back to doing that project. Yeah. I feel like even like the thing when we were talking about like gaps and like archives and stuff, like I feel like when we went to like that archive, we were looking for specific information but wasn't actually really there. Like I feel like a lot of the files like within a certain time period were like just missing, but I feel like it was like the kind of time period like when we were reading about it that had like the kind of like worst reputation for like abuse and stuff, which we found quite strange. Like I feel like we asked like the archivist about it and she was just like, I don't know. Yeah, like she said, like it was possible that they just been like destroyed or like that, because with like hospitals they like own like their own like information. Like they don't actually have to be archived like nationally.
Yeah,
I
I can't remember like the rules around it, but I feel like that archive we looked at was not one that's like generally open to the public. Like I feel like we got like permission to look at it because like you can get permission if you're like conducting like bona fide research or something, but I think that's just like if you're like you can have it like validated that you're making like a documentary or something like that.
Yeah, get like a letter of support from like an institution or something.
It's quite strict how you can like use it and stuff though. Like I feel like actually like a level of kind of like I think the word like the archivist can like decide whether they're gonna let you look at it or not. Because like I feel like when we were like doing that, they like told us that they would let us like use the documents and stuff, but like there are pictures of people and stuff, and then you can't like reproduce the pictures because they like identify people and like they ask you not to like publish people's names and stuff. Because like I feel like when it was like a hospital, it was just in like Letterkenny or something, like some of the things are from like the 1950s onwards, so like it's highly possible that they have like family members who are still alive and like may or may not know, or like other people might not know that they have like an institutional history and stuff, and it's not really fair to like share people's medical files. Sure. Just on the notion of like animation as a practical concern as well. I mean, as you develop ideas going forward, do you still see your practice being rooted in this animation approach, or have you? So I guess with the body as a body piece, of course, there was the wonderful 3D printed crosses that resulted from that as well. And I just wondered, is there any other potential ways you thought about the practice extending beyond animation going forward? I feel like we're like making stuff out of like stained glass at the minute, so I'm kind of like trying to make physical work from that, and I'm still interested in 3D printing. We also like started doing kind of like jewelry making, but with like the idea of like trying to maybe make like small like metal work like charms or something like that. But I feel like I haven't like gotten like super far with that yet because I feel like we like got like more funding for stained glass, so I'm like kind of focusing on that. Okay, terrific. Well, Kat, I think that's been really insightful and fantastic. So thank you both very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
just to reiterate what I said at the start, Éiméar and Kat, it's been a real pleasure working with you guys over the course of the two exhibitions. Yes, are making just incredible work, which is a testament to us, and it's been a real gift that we've been able to show some of this work as part of the exhibitions. So just to say thank you very much and the best of luck with everything going forward.
Thank you too. Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for joining us as well.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks for coming. Thank you.